People look at me and see power. They see a woman who has everything, the money, the company, the perfect life. But they don't see the truth. They don't see the silence that fills my house when I come home. They don't see how I still set 2 plates on the table, even though one has been empty for 7 years. I wasn't always like this. Once, I laughed, I dreamed, I believed the world was kind. Then, in one night, I lost the only person who ever called me mom. Since then, I built walls around my heart, high enough that no one could ever climb them. The phone on my desk rang. "Ma'am, there's a charity visit tomorrow at Bright Hope Orphanage," Harper said softly. "They're requesting your presence." "I don't do charity events," I replied without looking up. "It's under your mother's foundation," she added quietly. "Maybe it's time you went." I stared out the window. The city lights blurred behind the glass as rain began to fall. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "Go." The next morning, I arrived at the orphanage with my usual expression, calm, distant, untouchable. Children ran around laughing, their small voices echoing through the courtyard. I didn't join them, I simply stood there, watching from behind my dark glasses, waiting for this event to be over. Then I noticed her. A little girl standing alone near the corner, clutching a tiny silver necklace in her hand. She wasn't playing, she wasn't smiling, just staring at me, as if she knew something about me no one else did. I tried to ignore her and turned toward the staff. But before I could take another step, I heard a soft voice behind me. "Can you be my mom, for just one day?" My entire body froze. The sound of her voice cut through the noise around me. Slowly, I turned around. She was so small, with messy brown hair and eyes that looked far too old for her age. She held out the necklace toward me, her little hands shaking. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That necklace, it looked exactly like the one my daughter wore the night she disappeared. The same heart-shaped locket, the same tiny scratch on the side. I felt my chest tighten, but I forced a smile and stepped back. "I think you've mistaken me for someone else," I whispered. She tilted her head. "You look like her," she said softly. "My mom in my dreams." Something inside me cracked. I turned away before anyone could see the tears building in my eyes. As I walked back to the car, her words followed me, soft, fragile, unforgettable. "Can you be my mom for just one day?" No meeting, no boardroom, no success had ever shaken me the way that one sentence did. That night, for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that little girl. And that necklace shining in her small hand. The next morning, I sat in my office pretending to read reports, but my mind wasn't there. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about her, that little girl with the necklace. I called Harper inside. "Find out everything you can about the orphanage," I said quietly. She looked surprised. "You want to visit again?" "I just want to check on something." 2 hours later, I was back at Bright Hope Orphanage. I told myself it was for business, maybe to sponsor something, maybe to look responsible in the press. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. The moment I entered, she ran toward me. Her face lit up like sunshine. "You came back." Her tiny voice melted something inside me. I knelt down and smiled without thinking. "I had some free time," I said, pretending to sound casual. She giggled. "Do you want to see my drawings?" She took my hand and pulled me toward a small wooden table covered with papers and crayons. She showed me colorful stick figures, one tall woman and a small girl holding hands under a bright yellow sun. "This is me," she said proudly, pointing to the little one. "And this is my mom. She always wears pretty dresses and smells like roses." I looked at the picture. My throat tightened. "She looks kind," I whispered. "She is," she said, smiling. "She just hasn't found me yet." I didn't know what to say. I looked at her, those hopeful eyes, that innocent smile, and something I hadn't felt in years began to rise inside me. Warmth. I stayed longer than I planned. We read together, painted together, even shared cookies she had saved from lunch. When I finally stood up to leave, she held my hand. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. I hesitated. My heart said yes before my mind could say no. "Maybe," I replied softly. As I walked out, Harper whispered, "You look different, Claire." Softer. I didn't respond. But when I caught my reflection in the car window, I realized she was right. For the first time in 7 years, I was smiling. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I kept seeing her face, hearing her laugh, and picturing that small necklace glimmering in her hand. Every part of me wanted to know why it looked so familiar, why it felt like something from my own past. The next morning, I called Harper again. "Get me the orphanage's files," I said firmly. "I need to know about a girl named Ella." She looked at me carefully. "Claire, what's going on?" "Just find out," I whispered. When I arrived at the orphanage, Mrs. Collins greeted me kindly. I told her I wanted to know more about Ella, where she came from, how long she'd been here, anything. She hesitated, then led me into her small office and pulled out a thin file. "She was found outside a hospital about 7 years ago," Mrs. Collins said. "Wrapped in a pink blanket, wearing that necklace. We never found her parents." My heart started pounding. "Which hospital?" I asked. "St. Mary's," she replied. The room spun for a second. That was the same hospital where my baby had gone missing. The same night. The same necklace. I could barely speak. Can I take her for a day? Maybe spend some time with her outside the orphanage?" Mrs. Collins smiled gently. "You can apply for a visitor permit. I think Ella would love that." When I stepped outside, Ella ran toward me again. She hugged my leg, smiling. "You came back." I brushed her hair softly. "Would you like to spend a day with me, Ella?" Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" She screamed with joy, hugging me tighter. I held her close, feeling her tiny heartbeat against mine. Something deep in my soul told me I wasn't imagining this connection. Later that evening, as I watched her fall asleep in the car on our way back, I gently touched the necklace around her neck. The same little scratch was there. The same one my daughters had. The next few days felt like a dream I didn't want to wake from. Every morning, I found a reason to visit the orphanage. I told myself it was about charity, about helping the children, but deep down, I knew it was about her. About Ella. Each time I saw her, something in me healed a little more. She'd run to me, calling my name with that wide smile that could melt any heart. We'd draw together, feed the birds, or just sit quietly while she told me about her tiny world, her favorite storybooks, her dreams, and how she sometimes talked to the stars, asking them to find her mom. One afternoon, while she was showing me her drawings, she suddenly looked up and asked, "Miss Claire, do you think moms can forget their children?" The question hit me so hard I almost stopped breathing. "No," I whispered. "No, sweetheart. A mother never forgets." She smiled softly. "Then maybe mine will find me soon." I turned away, pretending to look at her drawing so she wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every piece of this puzzle pointed back to one impossible truth: Ella was mine. My lost daughter. The thought terrified me as much as it filled me with hope. I told Harper everything: the necklace, the hospital, the timing. She listened quietly, then said, "You need to know for sure. Do a DNA test." So I did. The next few days felt endless. I walked through my house like a ghost, waiting for a phone call that could either destroy me or bring me back to life. When Harper finally came into my office holding a white envelope, I couldn't move. My hands trembled as I opened it. My eyes scanned the page, and there it was. DNA match, 99.9%. For a moment, everything went silent. The world, the noise, the air, everything stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears flooding down my face. After all these years of emptiness, of guilt, of searching for meaning, I had found my little girl. I drove to the orphanage without saying a word to anyone. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but my heart felt alive for the first time in years. Every beat whispered her name. When I arrived, Ella was playing in the garden, chasing butterflies in the sunlight. She saw me and ran over, her laughter filling the air. "You came again," she said, breathless with joy. I knelt down and pulled her into my arms. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She looked up, confused. "Are you okay, Miss Claire?" I smiled through the tears. "I'm more than okay, sweetheart." She tilted her head, her small fingers touching my cheek. "You're crying." "Because I found something I thought I lost forever," I whispered. I took a deep breath and reached for her necklace. "Do you know where you got this?" She shook her head. "Mrs. Collins said I had it when they found me." I pressed the tiny heart-shaped locket open. Inside, a faded photo, a baby wrapped in a pink blanket, and next to it, my handwriting, "Love you always, Mom." I broke down completely. Years of pain, regret, and silence poured out of me in one trembling breath. She looked at me, scared. "Why are you crying like that?" "Because," I said softly, "you're my little girl. You've always been my little girl." For a second, she just stared at me, her innocent eyes searching mine. Then she whispered, "You mean, you're my mom?" I nodded, tears still falling. She smiled, slow at first, then wider and brighter until her whole face glowed. She threw her tiny arms around my neck. "I told the stars you'd find me," she said against my shoulder. I knew it. I held her tighter, feeling the world finally fall back into place. "I'm never letting you go again," I whispered. "Never." That night, when I tucked her into bed for the first time, she smiled up at me and said, "You don't have to be my mom for a day anymore, because now you're my mom forever." I sat beside her, brushing her hair gently as she drifted to sleep. For the first time in 7 years, I felt peace. I had spent my life building walls, hiding behind success, pretending not to feel. But one small girl, my little girl, had walked right through those walls, and gave me my heart back. Sometimes love doesn't need to find you twice. Sometimes it never left, it was just waiting for you to come home. A year later, everything about my life had changed. The office that once felt cold and silent now had laughter echoing through its halls. My desk, once covered in contracts and deadlines, now had drawings taped all over it, hearts, stick figures, flowers, and a smiling little girl who always drew herself holding my hand. Every morning before school, Ella would sit in my chair, pretending to be the boss. "Miss Harper," she'd say in her tiny serious voice, "cancel all meetings, I'm going to the park." Everyone in the office adored her. Even the toughest employees softened the moment she walked in. But the biggest change wasn't in the company. It was in me. I no longer rushed through life trying to fill an emptiness I couldn't name. I laughed again. I smiled without forcing it. I hugged people without feeling awkward. The walls I had spent years building had finally fallen, all because of one little girl with a necklace and a heart full of love. One afternoon, as we sat in the park together, Ella climbed onto my lap. She handed me a folded piece of paper with crayon marks all over it. "It's for you," she said proudly. I unfolded it and saw a simple drawing, 2 figures, one tall, one small, both smiling under a bright sun. At the top, in uneven letters, she had written, "Me and Mommy, forever." Tears filled my eyes. I hugged her tightly, breathing in her laughter, her warmth, her life. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered. "I love you more," I said softly. "More than all the stars you used to talk to." She giggled. "Then I don't need to talk to them anymore." As the sun began to set, I watched her run across the grass, chasing the wind. Free, happy, and loved. I thought about who I used to be, the woman who had everything except peace, the one who lived in silence, too afraid to feel. And then I looked at Ella, my miracle, and realized I hadn't just found my daughter. I had found myself again. I spent years building an empire made of walls. But one small girl tore them down with love. Sometimes, the greatest success in life isn't what you build, it's who you hold. And for me, it will always be her. That evening, after putting Ella to bed, I stood by her door for a long time, just watching her sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell in a slow, peaceful rhythm, her small hand resting over the same silver necklace that had once broken me, and now healed me. For years, I believed love was weakness. I believed strength meant silence. But looking at her, I realized how wrong I had been. Real strength is letting yourself feel again, even after the world has taken everything from you. I walked out to the balcony, the city lights glittering below like a sky turned upside down. The cool wind brushed against my face, and for the first time in so long, I whispered a quiet thank you, to life, to fate, to whatever power had brought her back to me. Harper called a few minutes later. "You sound lighter," she said. I smiled. Maybe because I finally stopped surviving and started living. "You really changed," she said softly. "No," I whispered, looking back toward Ella's room, "I just remembered who I was supposed to be." The next morning, I took Ella to the office with me again. She wore her favorite pink dress and held my hand proudly. As we walked in, everyone smiled and greeted her, even the ones who used to fear me. She looked up at me and said, "Mom, why does everyone smile at us now?" I laughed gently. "Because you taught me how to smile first." She grinned and squeezed my hand tighter. That day, when the sun began to set, she stood by the big window in my office, watching the sky turn orange. "Mom," she said softly, "remember when I asked if you could be my mom for a day?" I nodded, my heart full. "I think that was the best question I ever asked," she said. I bent down and kissed her forehead. "And the best answer I ever gave." Outside, the world kept moving, meetings, deadlines, cars, noise, but for us, time stood still. Sometimes love doesn't come when you're ready. It comes when you've forgotten how to ask for it. And sometimes, it doesn't knock on your door, it simply looks up at you with a smile and says, "Can you be my mom for a day?" And that one question changes everything. A few weeks later, Ella officially became mine. The adoption papers were signed, and the judge smiled as he said, "Congratulations, Ms. Claire. You're officially a mother." Ella jumped into my arms, her laughter echoing through the courtroom. I held her close, tears streaming down my face, the kind of tears I used to think I'd never cry again. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like hope. Reporters tried to ask questions, but I didn't stop. I just walked to my car with Ella in my arms, her tiny head resting on my shoulder. At home, she ran straight to her room and placed the silver necklace on my desk. "This was my mom's," she said softly. "But I think she would want you to have it now." My throat tightened. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" She nodded. "Because now, you're my mom too." I took the necklace and clasped it around my neck. For a moment, I could almost feel the warmth of the woman who had loved her first, and somehow, it felt like she was blessing us both. From that day, my world changed completely. The office wasn't just a cold glass tower anymore. It was filled with drawings taped to walls, laughter in the hallways, and the smell of hot chocolate every morning. I started taking weekends off, something I never thought I'd do. Harper once joked, "I can't believe that Claire Anderson just canceled a board meeting to take a 6-year-old to the zoo." I laughed and said, "Well, the zoo has better company." At night, when Ella fell asleep beside me, I often looked at her and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." Because the truth was, I didn't rescue her, she rescued me. And every time she smiled, every time she called me mom, I knew that lonely CEO was gone forever. Only Claire remained, not the woman who built an empire, but the woman who finally built a home. Months passed, and our lives found a gentle rhythm. Mornings began with Ella's laughter echoing through the apartment, her tiny feet racing down the hallway, demanding pancakes shaped like hearts. Evenings ended with bedtime stories and whispered prayers, hers always ended the same way, "Thank you for my mom." One day, the company hosted a charity gala, the same event I once dreaded because it reminded me of everything I didn't have. This time, I brought Ella with me. She wore a soft lavender dress, her hair tied with a satin ribbon, her necklace glinting under the lights. As we entered, people turned and smiled, not out of fear or respect, but warmth. I felt something I hadn't in years, belonging. Halfway through the event, an elderly woman approached. "You're Claire Anderson, right? The CEO who adopted that little girl?" I nodded, smiling proudly. The woman placed her hand on my shoulder. "You didn't just give her a family. You gave her a story of love the world needed to see." Her words stayed with me long after the lights dimmed and the applause faded. Later that night, as I tucked Ella into bed, she looked up at me and asked, "Mom, do you think my real mom can see me from the sky?" I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't just think so, sweetheart. I know she's watching you, and she's proud." Ella smiled sleepily. "Then she must be proud of you too." That single sentence broke me in the most beautiful way. I kissed her forehead, whispering, "Good night, my little miracle." As she drifted to sleep, I looked out the window at the quiet city, the same city that once made me feel so small. Now, it was home. Because love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes, it walks into your life wearing tiny shoes, holding a worn-out teddy bear, and asking the simplest question in the world. "Can you be my mom for a day?" And you say yes. Without realizing that one small yes will rewrite your entire life.